Joining us now to discuss the top political stories of the day, Deputy Political Editor and columnist at The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mihailova is with us. Anna, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, let's start off then with Keir Starmer. He's going to make all things good and great and safe on our streets. What a nice man. Let's have a listen then, firstly, to that interview he's given, and we can play it out in full later on Talk. But this is a little section of his chat with Peter Cardwell on knife crime. Here it is.
I'm really worried about this. Knife crime is up 70% since 2015. We do three things. The first is ban the sale of online knives like zombie knives. Second thing is we've got a Young Futures programme, which is to pull youngsters out of the system where they're going off the rails. Then third thing, if that doesn't happen or doesn't work in all cases, which it won't, is to have proper consequences. If you carry a knife, you carry the consequences.
I don't really know, Anna, what that... You carry the knife, you carry the consequences. I mean, certainly at the moment there is a very real view out there that there are few consequences just for carrying a knife. Even using it sometimes doesn't really touch the sides when it comes to justice. Keir Starmer appears here to be saying things that I've heard lots of times from lots of politicians over the last 20 years.
Well, the zombie knife thing in particular really sounds familiar, and I was convinced that the Conservative government had actually outlawed them because there was so much talk of it. And I did check before coming on, and Labour basically said that they haven't fully done it. They've part done it, but it's not tough enough. They don't outlaw all kinds of zombie knives, basically. Right. So that does sound like a no-brainer, frankly, and something that Keir Starmer has pledged to do straight away. On the consequences, I mean, look, exactly as you say, what are the details there? And then the other thing is, he says you'll face consequences if you're found carrying a knife. One of the problems is stop and search powers have really gone down. So if you can't stop and search people and those numbers are going down, then you're not going to find them and you're not going to give them any, they're not going to be able to face any consequences until it's too late.
It does seem interesting that, I mean, we've been speaking to knife crime victims and those that work in areas of stop and search and the like, and nobody, I've never heard, and I've interviewed Lord knows how many Home Secretaries on this over the years, and I've never heard anybody say, right, if you're caught carrying a knife, you are going to jail. I've never heard that. I've never heard them say, by way of maybe a compromise, because our prisons are quite full, if you're caught carrying a knife, you'll be given a tag and a curfew. Now, that sounds to me like potentially a very efficient and much cheaper way of dealing with something. But again, I hear what seem like very vague ideas. We'll talk to the victims, we'll talk to the families, we'll try and winkle out vulnerable kids early doors. There's no real sort of sense of robust meat on the bones when it comes to this from politicians.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and look, I think jailing someone for just carrying a knife is probably too harsh. But as you correctly allude to, the prisons are already full with actual criminals who've actually gone on committing those crimes. So that is certainly not an option. But yeah, we want to hear detail. I did find it fascinating watching that interview with Peter Cardwell, though, how relaxed he looks. I mean, his body language, this is Keir Starmer, not Peter. His body language...
Peter's always relaxed, of course.
Yeah. It looks very, very assertive, confident. And don't forget, with this knife crime announcement, he's parking his tanks on the Conservatives' lawn. This should be Conservative. This is their remit. Yeah. This is what they should be good at. And pointing out the fact that they haven't fully managed to ban zombie knives is pretty embarrassing after 14 years, frankly.
Indeed. Yes, Keir Starmer looks like the man who's already got the job, doesn't he? And, of course, if we believe the polls, then he has. And was that was that a little clue there to the Mail on Sunday supporting a Starmer government, Anna?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, not least am I completely not privy to those conversations. Yeah. But you're the first to know, Ian, if I was.
Of course, yes. I await the text. I can't wait. Let's move on then to another area that is sort of curiously always divides the room. And again, we hear lots of platitudes. We hear lots of statements. Doesn't seem to come to much. Illegal immigrants are queuing in Calais, apparently, according to the Prime Minister. Let's have a little listen to what he said. This was the Sun's Never Mind the Ballots debate yesterday with Keir and Rishi. Here's what he said is happening or could happen under a Labour government when it comes to immigration.
those illegal migrants will not be on planes to Rwanda. They will be out on our streets putting pressure on public services. And, by the way, I can tell you now, they are queuing up in Calais waiting for a Starmer government so they can come here and stay here.
Oh,
like, that is the choice.
He actually said that, Anna, as if he'd sort of been there with a clipboard and counted people. I don't know whether maybe it was just a sort of an analogy he was making with, you know, if you get a Labour
And maybe
government,
on the way back from D-Day he made a pit stop.
He could have done, yes, because, you know, he did leave early after all, so he had time on his hands. But he looked down and counted from above, perhaps, from the Prime Ministerial helicopter. But it's interesting because I'm hearing the same problem with this debate as we just described with knife crime. This morning we had James Cleverly and Yvette Cooper battling it out on another radio station. And I say battling, it's like, well, what are the significant differences here? She's saying Rwanda is a rubbish idea, but don't worry, we're in favour of a third country approach, just not the one the Tories have picked. And when pressed which third country, she couldn't really answer that question. We don't seem to have, and I think reasonably, any faith in politicians to solve this.
I mean, look, the fact that Labour have basically been able to get away with most of this election campaign without answering proper questions on both immigration, as you correctly point out, and also tax, is quite something. I don't particularly blame them not wanting to give out details because they're so far ahead in the polls, they don't really need to, but it's you know, our job as journalists, it's the public's job, it's other politicians' job to hold them to scrutiny. The problem with the so many blunders of the Conservative campaign, with obviously the betting scandal being the latest, but a massive one, is they sort of lose credibility when they actually start making these points. I mean, that argument that Rishi Sunak was landing yesterday about the queues in Calais, that is precisely what his MPs, his Tory candidates, have wanted him to do. They've wanted him to get more personal with Keir Starmer. They've wanted him to be more on the attack. And I think his team pretty much would have been quite happy with his performance yesterday, only it just feels like it's come a bit too late. I mean, we're just over a week away from the polls.
Indeed, and of course he's always going to be on a sticky wicket with this one, given that the government of the day have been there for a decade and a half. It always sounds a little rich now, saying, you know, this issue is safe in our hands, when demonstrably it hasn't been.
Yeah, but I think there is a very valid point about Rwanda. Not only does it not work as a deterrent because, well, the government has just not yet sent anyone on a flight, and of course that's one of the big headaches for people in this campaign in the Conservative Party. Why did Rishi Sunak call this election and on the premise of, if you vote me in July, you'll see planes flying off, instead of actually getting a plane off the ground? And, you know, a single plane would have made so many of his MPs happy, and actually doing it. Now, Labour saying they're going to cancel the Rwanda scheme effectively completely closes down the deterrent element there, because considering the criminal gangs, who I'm sure do follow politics and do look at who's probably about to get elected, they look at it and they say, well, there's no chance we're going to Rwanda because Labour's coming in and they're going to scrap the scheme.
And whatever way you slice it, I think there will always be, it's not a partisan point, there will always be a sense that, you know, if it's been easy right now, under Labour, it might just be a little easier.
Well, certainly. I mean, Keir Starmer's big pledge on immigration is that he is going to smash the gangs. This is what we hear over and over again. And he is very much drawing on his background as the Director of Public Prosecutions in prosecuting difficult cases. Now, that may well be the case, but these gangs, they're international. I mean, you've had all these countries who all face the same problem, unable to actually do something about it. And the idea that our National Crime Agency, which struggles to even get to grips with British crime, is going to suddenly be able to do something about these very, very global gangs is just slightly unbelievable, frankly.
Yeah. Let's move to the Conservative Party betting scandal. Again, a sentence I never thought I would utter 2 weeks ago. There is a little bit of breaking news as well that has just come in, Anna, on that. The Gambling Commission has passed information to the Met Police alleging 5 more police officers placed bets related to the time of the general election. I mean, this is going from bad to worse, this thing.
So, yes, this was first broken by the Telegraph this morning. 5 more police officers. And, of course, we've also had the breaking news today that Rishi Sunak has finally said he won't support the 2 Conservative candidates in the election.
Took a while, didn't it, to come up with that?
Exactly. It should have been done a week ago. I mean, the bizarre thing is that was off the back of an internal review by the Cabinet Office. And instead of doing something about it yesterday, his team let him go on The Sun, go on the debate and repeat the old line of, I'm not going to do about this. It's just bizarre. I mean, so many things in this election campaign have been badly managed, badly handled, particularly on the comms side, that it makes you...
I can't, look, you know what it's like in the lobby. I've been in the lobby. It's one of those, you get to know some of those characters around the Prime Minister as well. And over the years, you can see why, whether it's Cameron or May, appointed that person and how good they were at the job. Of course, most famously were Alistair Campbell back in the day, those that really have the ear of the Prime Minister. I have no idea who Rishi... I'm willing to believe there's actually nobody works with him. It's that bad that I think he must just go to bed at night with his little notepad and go, I think I'll say this tomorrow. Because some of the advice he's had throughout this campaign, Anna, has been horrendous.
Look, a lot of this was actually very predictable. Rishi Sunak had many qualities as Chancellor, and he's a very hardworking, conscientious minister, but he is not political. It was very obvious the way he handled his that story about his wife's non-dom status, that he just does not have, that political antennae that so many people need to get to the top. And that was clear then. That was what many MPs said when they refused to back him for leadership, the ones who warned against it at the time. And instead, the party, after Liz Truss, still made him Prime Minister, ignored all of that. There were some people around him that made promises to MPs that I have spoken to, saying, don't worry, we will fix this. We know he's not particularly political, but we'll get a grip on it. And they haven't. And I think one of the problems is not only is he personally not really got that political nous, he also surrounds himself with people who are very, very loyal, so very old friends. Craig Williams, for example, is a very well-liked MP, and the job he's been doing in Parliament, people from both sides within the party do actually like him, get along with him. He's generally accepted to have done a good job, and I wonder if the reason the delay has happened is just because Rishi Sunak is loyal to him, and he doesn't quite get it. Sometimes you just have to be ruthless.
But you need at least one character around you, don't you? That I mentioned the Alistair Campbell thing, and other prime ministers have had similar. Whether they happen to be a fellow member of Parliament, or whether they're somebody you've appointed because you're aware of their kind of skills, their communication skills, just their general advice, their wisdom, their political antennae, as you put it. You do need that as a Prime Minister. You absolutely need, what Princess Diana called a rock. You need that person to be there for you 24/7 in that job.
Absolutely. And this number 10 is an interesting one because unlike the operation under Boris Johnson, they really don't leak. So even though people knew for about a week before the general election was happening in July, that didn't leak. And there have been several examples of this. And what that shows you is the way Rishi Sunak runs it is he does have a core team of extremely loyal people to him, but he also doesn't trust many people outside of it. Yeah. And when your core team includes your best friend from school, that can be a problem because you're not surrounding yourself with a diverse enough group of people who have different talents. So you need that political shark in there. You need that, to Tony Blair, the John Prescott figure, as well as the Alistair Campbell figure, if we remember. With Rishi Sunak's team, it's a lot more people who are similar to him.
And that's it, isn't it? You need somebody with the... I mean, you know what that world is like down there at Westminster. It's a dog-eat-dog mentality. It can be, brutal. I'm just talking about the press gallery here. I mean, it can be all manner of things, There's always a bit of a fight to have somewhere. It's usually solved amicably. But, yes, you've got to you've got to have somebody who's fully aware of how that whole thing operates, which again was why Campbell was good. He'd been a journalist. He knew where the bear traps were. He knew how to answer questions or appear to answer questions but not answer, all of those things. And, we just, I think, as you rightly so, maybe Rishi has just been victim of being, a nice-ish chap. And I wonder whether that's really his downfall.
I mean, perhaps, but it's also just, I don't think he gets it. I don't think he's quite right for the job. And I think possibly as well, don't forget, he's only been in politics for not very long. He has not been an MP for that long, and he has certainly not been a senior cabinet minister for long before becoming prime minister. And I think that means he's slightly untrained in these sort of crisis issues. So, of course, he came in to the background of much scandal under Boris Johnson and followed Liz Truss. But that doesn't excuse him. He's still got the top job.
Indeed. Final one here. Labour will ban conversion therapy despite test case fears. This is the introduction of a full ban on conversion therapy if it wins the election, despite warnings that doing so may encroach on the freedom of parents and therapists to talk to children about gender identity issues. And I sense, Anna, the problem with this is how do you define conversion therapy? I mean, strapping somebody to a table and attaching electrodes to their heads and, saying a few Hail Marys or whatever the heck some people suggest you do is very different to sitting down with a very intelligent, caring counsellor that might want to just talk through your issues.
I think this is an example of an issue that almost everyone instinctively supports and thinks should happen, cross-party. And then when you come down to trying to legislate, people realise how complicated it is.
Yeah.
It's just, so Dr. Hilary Cass, who obviously wrote the very significant Cass review, in it she said it's very difficult to know how to legislate and draft laws in a way that doesn't accidentally punish teachers or doctors who do try and help some children or teenagers going through something with advice that they could be criminalized with certain laws if they are written in too draconian a fashion. And that is certainly, I mean, this has been a really big issue for the Conservative Party that first pledged this, and they ended up watering it down just because of this whole issue.
Well, we'll watch with interest. This is only a week away. Are you I mean, journalistically, are the excitement levels peaking yet, Anna? I mean, this is this is what it's all about, this job, isn't it? Elections and the like, and this is a big one coming in 9 days' time.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's been fascinating to watch, and it will certainly be a big one to stay up on the night for.
Indeed. Good luck with the coverage. It's always superb. Thank you, Anna Mihalova. Of course, she's Deputy Political Editor and columnist over there at the Mail on Sunday. Thank you to her.